I admit, I still get distracted if people use double negatives on a post or when someone begins a sentence with him and I went. And of course, if the words there, and there, or your and your are misused, I feel a twitch. I've tried to not be a grammar and spelling snob, but I was raised by one and it's hard to let go. Welcome to Calm in the Chaos, where you're with an apostrophe RE, probably wondering what this has to do with spiritual maturity. And I'm ready to tell you. The title of the God Talk is Don't Do Nothing, which, as a double negative, implies a directive to do something. And now the question, how on earth am I supposed to do anything about the rising ocean waters, the extreme heat that is worldwide, the gangs killing one another, the quality of water coming out of the tap, the disrespect we feel from children, teens, and adults in our community? What can I possibly do to change things? I would rather just stay to myself, scrolling away on sites that I agree with. I'd rather hibernate in my own tiny circle of people who believe what I believe and behave in ways that make me comfortable. And you know what? Our nervous systems need all of that comfort, but not 100% of the time. It's all about balancing and managing our lives. And nobody I know has more structure and balance than people who have chosen to live a monastic life. So today I'm going to take us on a little journey into a monastery, a Benedictine one to be exact, guided by the life of Saint Benedict. Daily life in the monastery is planned mainly around two aspects of living: prayer and work. Prayer life has a rhythm to it called the Liturgy of the Hours, which means activities stop and communal prayer takes place at prescribed times each day. Now, Benedictines are not the only people in the world whose prayers are determined by the cycle of a day. Muslims pray scripted prayers 5 times daily. Orthodox Jews pray morning, afternoon, and evening each day. Hindus, Zoroastrians, and people who follow the Baha'i faith tradition also have prescribed prayer times every day. For my spiritual path, I admit I've tried to follow a daily routine of prayer, but I've not been faithful to sustaining it. And the practice sort of comes and goes in my life, maybe yours too. The Benedictines in the monastery may pray for the first time each day at 5 or 6 a.m., and then another prayer follows as the sun rises. Midday prayers are the next time activities pause, and they are followed by another time around sunset, with the day culminating in night prayers called Compline. Surrounding the prayer times are the work hours. Now, there are three types of work for a Benedictine. There's the work that is necessary to sustain the residence, manual work of gardening, for instance. There's the work of deepening one's spiritual life by reading and studying. And then there's the work of service that is provided in the community. Some monasteries operate bookstores or bakeries or other endeavors to enrich their community and provide funds for their projects. I find this to be fascinating inasmuch as I enjoy a rhythm to my day. Routine has its comforts, and in my case, allows creative juice to follow freely and to rapidly approach in my brain. And then there's the breakdown of the word work. 21st century life in communities around here define work mainly as that which we do to earn money to buy what we need, and for many of us to buy that which we want. But work has a different slant to it for the residents of a Benedictine monastery, and I might like to adapt and adopt that new outlook. Work is not to earn money, work is to add value to life, personally and for the community. To add value to life. I'll quote Sister Joan Chittister in her newsletter called The Monastic Way, and she says, the spirituality of work, the ancient rule of Benedict implies, has five components. It sees work as your gift to the world. It builds the human community. It leads to self fulfillment. It saves you from total self centeredness. It gives you a reason to exist that is larger than yourself. How many of us spend our hours doing something that simply pays the bills? Is there a possibility on the horizon of choosing something that would be more spiritually aligned? Something that adds value in a self nurturing way, something that benefits and sustains community life? Something to think about. I can't help but think of the Buddhist Eightfold Path right here as well. One of the eight is called right livelihood. Following the Eightfold Path as a way of living requires us to rethink our choices of how we work every day. Right livelihood means we choose to engage in meaningful work that does not harm any part of the world, not animals, humans, rivers, trees. So, working in a gun factory is not an option. Neither is slaughterhouse work or selling alcohol. Interesting way to think, interesting way to live our lives. Now, another aspect of Benedictine life that interests me is that of hospitality. Now, I hosted guests at a B&B outside Rochester, New York for several decades with family and friends asking all along the way, aren't you nervous about having strangers in your house? No, I was never nervous. People who choose a traditional B&B where the host lives on site and serves breakfast with doilies and fresh fruit are people who know that the host is right there, and they are choosing to stay in a much more intimate setting than in a hotel. They're not strangers, they're guests. My spiritual training and my personality have meshed together for me to not live in fear, to welcome the guest with the very best face of hospitality on display. The welcoming atmosphere of a monastery is usually seen as a sacred part of the resident's relationship with Christ, who is the unseen guest at every meal. Some of you may have sat at a Thanksgiving table in my house where anyone who was not surrounded by family would gather at Thanksgiving and be my family. They'd rather be with new friends than be alone on that holiday, and they were invited every year. Some years it's been pretty crowded, but the joy is palpable. I feel with the increased awareness of terrifying events in our country, our sense of hospitality is suffering, it's diminishing. We're living with more caution, which can not only be fueled by fear, but also results in our choosing more distance and isolation, compounding the fear of others, our fear of someone who's different from us. Because we all know of other, and what we hear of other is on selected news feeds that we've chosen. I don't need a sociologist's research to know that as humans, we tend to choose our YouTube channels and our Instagram followings that align with what we already believe as our truth. So learning about other is not the hottest topic on most of our agendas when it's a little uncomfortable or stretches us outside our comfort zones. Hospitality needs to be resurrected as a community building resource, personal and group hospitality. Let's define genuine hospitality as making others feel seen, heard, and valued. It's right up there with good manners. The idea of welcoming people into our lives appears in many sacred texts. Our Sikh neighbors see hospitality as a spiritual practice, and one of the most visible forms is the serving of langar, which is a community meal. It's not unlike food served at local churches when they have a free meal open to anyone who comes through their doors. Longar is served to everyone, regardless of wealth, gender, ethnicity, religion, and any other topic you can name. Everyone sits together and is served identical plates, symbolizing that everyone is of equal value. Hospitality is not just have a seat, it's more about seeing one another as equal humans. Our Christian neighbors have been taught the 35th verse from Matthew chapter 25, where Jesus says, "For I was hungry and you gave me food, I was thirsty and you gave me drink, I was a stranger and you welcomed me." Now, though I believe none of my readers lives in a monastery, and if you do, let me know, there are ways that each of us can add an extra dimension to the spiritual practices of hospitality. We can take on a little Benedictine mindset and see this not as more work with drudgery, planning, exhaustion, but as work that is a sacred part of who we are, the work that enriches lives, including our own. I collected a few ideas. Let hospitality become part of our spiritual lives by acknowledging that we're giving people space to be. Yes, it can include physical space, but more than that, we're opening our hearts and our love to invite another to be who they truly are when they're in our presence. A safe place, in addition to the physical place at the table. How about we notice one another more? A smile to another while walking the dog. Hi there to the person ahead of us while we're putting groceries on the conveyor belt. Nobody ever talks in the grocery store unless they know the people. I started talking to people at the checkout a lot. Everybody smiles back and is very cordial. You have to try to remember details about one another too, especially names. Offer a drink to everyone who's on the property. It's not hard to have a few seltzer water cans in the back of the fridge to offer the woman who trims my shrubbery, the man who's painting the garage. You get the idea. Ever since the pandemic, my friend Tina has maintained a box of snacks on her porch for delivery people to help themselves. It's still there. I've seen it. After living in a home with a very particular household rule of getting ready for company, I have finally let go and no longer spend precious hours perfecting my space before somebody visits. If the vacuum cleaner is sitting in the hallway when the guests arrive, there's no apology here. I have made a concerted effort to focus on the people. And a few micro hospitality acts. Just grab an extra coffee for somebody at work. Put a tiny plant on their desk. Call or text someone. Just say, "Hi, I'm thinking about you today. Hope you're well." Talk to strangers. Maybe they're, and that's the apostrophe RE again, maybe they're just friends you haven't met yet. Blessings on all.